We are part of nature, included in it, and thus in constant interaction.
We're going to talk about Chapter 4 of Pope Francis's work on the environment, and it really talks about integral ecology. And we have heard from the quote that nature cannot be regarded as something separate from ourselves, or as a mere setting in which we live. We are part of nature, and it has to be emphasized throughout this whole chapter. And it includes in it a constant interaction with nature on our part. And so our environment and ecology is really a social ecology, and the two are together. We know that we're interrelated in so many ways, physically, chemically, biologically. All aspects of the planet really are interrelated, and humans are part of that. We share genetic code with many living beings. And so when problems arise, there's more than just an environmental problem that can be answered in some type of technical sense or political action. It involves the whole process of human living. That includes the culture and the whole setting that we have and to live in. And so the solutions have to be on more than just a single level. Each organism is a creature of God and is a good, and it's admirable in itself. And it has to be sustainably continued. I mean, and sustainable means that we have to be able to, in a well-being that includes all of us, and that it will continue over time. So we consider it that way. And as it is, and a lot of people, including the Pope, thinks that this is unsustainable, the system that we've got today, and therefore changes have got to be made. And so this chapter really tells us a little bit more about some of those changes that we've really got to consider. And so we think about that is, how do we as people, and also as nations, how do we have regulations that protect that relationships that we must have? The balance that we talked about earlier in Chapter 2, in harmony. Therefore, we need structures set up that will help to protect them. But it can't be done by individuals alone. We are part of a whole system, a social system and a political system, where we have to interact with each other. And silence is no way that will bring this about on our parts if we don't have action. And yet, at the same time, we need a certain amount of silence in our own lives, as we said before. Therefore, we talk about the social ecology. And the Pope says, together with the patrimony of nature, there is also an historic, artistic, and cultural patrimony, which is likewise under threat. In other words, the Chartres Cathedral is melting by carbon dioxide emissions and acid rain that will come upon it. And therefore, we also have the Roman Colosseum, which actually, in ways, is eroding for the air that's around it. He doesn't bring these examples up, but I personally have been at both places and seen them. Preserving these treasures is therefore a necessary part of our ecological action that we're taking. The consumers, well, they're people who enjoy different things. They have a vision, and that vision usually becomes far more globalized than we imagine. People in all parts of the world want to have certain things, and in doing so, they could hurt others. And therefore, we are not only globalizing our desires and wants, but we're also globalizing the effects of what we have on other things. And nor can the notion of a quality of life be imposed from outside but a quality of life must be, the Pope says, understood within a world of symbols and customs proper to each human group. Therefore, we can talk about these things in a global way, but we also have to remember that we are parts of cultures that are really subdivided into our homelands, and ultimately it is our home and the family that makes up the greater part of the basic root and the foundational stone on which the society is based. And therefore we have to constantly think of ways in which these can be preserved and improved. And the disappearance of cultures, and that would include languages really, because half of them are dying in this century, there is a great aspect of the damaging that's being done to plants and animals as well. And this culture that we have is threatened as much as that of what we spoke of in chapter 1, as far as animals and plants go. The biodiversity being hurt in some fashion. And that is partly that we have to look at this as land is a sacred space, a gift from God, a place to respect. We respect the local communities in which make up this world. We don't say that some elite area is so much better that another one can die. That is not right. The diversity of our own world demands that we give attention to all the various cultural areas that could be damaged. Whether it's a strip mine area that would destroy the community's life in a given place where mining is being done, or if it's a seashore which is now rising, and therefore people will lose their home, their place of residence. And so all of this is part of what we think about, and therefore he moves it from what we're just talking about to an ecology of daily life. That noise and ugliness, as we mentioned before, it's very difficult in a place where people are trying to live in a happy situation. It's being damaged by congestion, noise, emotions that go beyond what a human being should need for his quality or her quality of life. People respond with a brightening of the interior space, as we mentioned earlier, and therefore they try in the best way possible to give dignity to their life in some fashion, even those who are poor and in extreme circumstances. But again, extreme poverty is something that we can't tolerate. It's a brutality. It's an exploitation by criminal organizations, which could be large corporations in some cases, or governments that are indifferent to what people have, or just individuals who have so much power over an area that is no longer public area, but it has been privatized to a point of where people have no place to turn, move, recreate, or come about. And so extreme poverty is something that we have to fight against and expose, and that's part of the environmental crisis also. Rural and urban landscapes have to be preserved. This is a sense of the rootedness, the home, which was the basis for what this book has been, or this encyclical has been about. Housing is a major issue, and for this human ecology that has to be preserved. Decent housing is something a lot of people do not have. Probably 1 billion people in the world need better housing. It's good work, which should be done. Public transportation is another. We have to build the infrastructures that allow railroads and other means of transportation where people can travel and move about. That's part of quality of life that we all need and have. So the realities is that, well, the rural and the urban poor can sometimes be very isolated and not able to move about in a way in which a decent human being's life should be lived, and therefore they are hurt in some fashion. The Pope says that human ecology also implies another profound reality, the relationship between human life and the moral law. People are related to nature, true enough, and that nature cannot be controlled by certain ones and become people of absolute power who have over another human being's life. The moral law says that we all have a just and a right to just society. And so we move then into what is called the principle of the common good. And that is a central and unifying principle of social ethics. The common good is that means that all people have a right to have a goodness in their life, and therefore they can't be put in slavery, in a form of slavery, or they can be in some way diminished in saying that only certain ones have privileges, others do not. This is not the world that needs to have a common good. That is backed by basic and inalienable rights that we have been talking about, especially back in the first chapter, and that was the right to water, the right to having a good life in so many ways, food, essentials of life. These are part of the rights of every human being. And the family is the basic unit again, and therefore we look very carefully at controlling in such situations, and governments have a lot of play to do here, in which that common good is preserved. It can't be done just by individuals or by small communities. We've got to work together. Now that brings us to the principle of subsidiarity, which the Pope brings up. And that is, of course, you try to keep everything on the local level if possible, and it can work better at the smallest level possible. But that does not mean that it stops there. There are levels, and all these levels are part of the whole life of the world, the stability of the world. Therefore, when we deal with environment, there are areas that only governments and governments together with other governments can accomplish in order to preserve what we got. It cannot be all done on the local level alone. But it is a place where we preserve the very beginnings, because as much as can be done there, as much should be done. And we'll bring that up in chapter 5 and 6. But this brings a concluding point, and that is that there must be justice in and among every generation. It's not only the people that we have, and we're talking about the poor having a preferential option that we might say for looking for, especially for the poor, especially the poor who could be hurt in some fashion, but we also are looking to those that are going to come after us. We are not living in a world that is apart from those who are the future, the descendants of the people that we have now. Selfishness would say, after I die, nothing more, who cares? But we are not that way. We are sharing. We are respectful. Respectful not only of the people that we have around us, but the Pope asks this, what kind of world do we want to leave to those who come after us, to children who are now growing up? That's a basic question. What is our purpose? Why are we here? Doomsday, well, we could talk about that and scare people to death, maybe. But at least we should bring it up, and it brings up in times of the church functions of Advent and Lent. But contemporary life is, well, in the present form, unsustainable. And therefore, we have got to think of ways, and that's what we're moving to more concrete action in chapter 5. What are the ways that allow this contemporary life to become again sustainable for everyone, not just for a few? The lack of a future concern becomes something that is very closely connected to our concern about our present poor. We have to do the two together. Have to prepare for our future, but we also have to take care of the poor today. So it's a rather serious note on chapter 4, but we are going to be moving to chapter 5 and approaches to the actions that we should take.